Dark clouds gathered overhead as I made my way through the winding forest path, the skies seeming to sense my trepidation. It was said that those who ventured to that forsaken village never returned the same. I knew the tale. It had spread from hush corner to hush corner among traveling storytellers. But fascination and curiosity overpowered caution, leading me along the dank trail that snaked increasingly deeper into the heart of the ancient woods. I had expected some sense of isolation, but not to this extent. The native birds had gone silent, and every tree trunk appeared twisted, contorted by harsh weather, or perhaps by whatever malignant spirit clutched the land. My lantern cast a feeble glow on roots that jutted out like skeletal arms, seeking to trip travelers. The air itself felt heavy, each breath filling my lungs with a chill that prickled the skin from inside. Occasionally, I could hear scuttling under dry leaves, as though creatures slithered mere feet away from me, out of reach of my lantern's light. Yet, I pressed on, convinced that knowledge of the hidden curse was worth the risk, worth the brush with creeping horrors. When I finally crossed under a rotting wooden archway that marked the boundary, the village revealed itself in a clearing. A dozen or so houses were spaced along a cobblestone street, their thatched roofs sagging, shutters hanging crookedly. I paused, uncertain if I should knock on the nearest door for lodging, or if I should simply wander until someone emerged. The wind gusted across the vacant street, stirring dust and leaves into an eddy that spiraled past me, almost as if beckoning me onward. The first house I took notice of seemed uninhabited, 2 stories tall, with a scorched wooden frame. It looked as though a fire had threatened to devour it, but stopped mere inches from truly consuming the outer walls. As I approached, the old door creaked open on its own. The entire doorway yawned toward me like a maw. I felt no warmth or lamplight from inside, so I took a single step past the threshold, shining my lantern's glow into the parlor. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, dangling ominously, and the furniture was little more than tattered remains. But to my surprise, the space wasn't empty. A figure stood near the fireplace, so still it resembled a statue. Its head was bowed slightly, shoulders hunched. In the flicker of my lantern, I realized there was no face, just a smooth, pale oval where eyes, nose, and mouth should have been. Horror snaked up my spine, threatening to choke my scream. The figure cocked its head as though returning my gaze, but it made no sound. Then, in a slow, mechanical gesture, it raised its hands to mimic holding a lantern, just as I was. I stumbled backward, nearly toppling into the street. Outside, I gulped the cold air, heart pounding. My mind wrestled with what I had witnessed. A faceless wraith, a mockery of a person, stood in that wrecked house, holding a phantom lantern. Was this the curse I had heard whispered about, that each home housed a creature that mirrored its inhabitant down to the smallest habits? My resolve struggled against the flood of terror. Part of me screamed to run from this haunted place, yet a deeper compulsion drew me forward. I had come seeking the truth of these villagers' plight, and the closer I edged to the heart of the curse, the more I felt a grim, mesmerizing pull. I forced my legs to carry me onward, further into the village. Lanterns that should have illuminated windows at dusk were absent, so the place felt enveloped in perpetual twilight. I ventured past boarded-up buildings and shattered windows. At last, the sound of a creaking sign swaying in the breeze lured me to what looked like an inn. Its sign depicted a faint outline of a blackbird or raven, though the paint was so faded I could only just discern it. Inside, the air smelled of damp wood and decay. Shelves that once held rolled blankets or cups were barren. A dusty front desk stood near the entrance with a tarnished bell on top. Cautiously, I tapped the bell, the clang resonating in the stillness. From the corridor behind the desk, a figure emerged, so silent I didn't notice at first. "Hello?" I called out with deliberate calm, suspecting I might see that unholy blank face again. To my surprise, the figure had features, a gaunt man with thick circles under his eyes and lips pressed in a grim line. He was older, with deeply etched lines on his brow. His gaze avoided mine, as though seeing something behind or beyond me. "You should not have come," he rasped. His voice was as dry as parchment, and it quivered with underlying dread. "Are you the innkeeper?" I asked, too unsettled to form more elaborate inquiry. He nodded faintly, his eyes darting to the corridor behind him, as though some beast might leap out at any moment. "I can give you a room, if that's what you want," he said in a low mutter. I wanted to ask him about the curse, about the faceless figure I had seen, but as he slipped around the desk to shuffle through a set of dusty keys, I noticed his skin glistening with a cold sweat. "Have you lived here long?" I ventured. "What do you know about the faceless things?" He paused, a slight tremor visible in his hand. "Come with me," he said, ignoring my question for the moment. "I'll show you your room." I followed as the floorboards groaned underfoot. The hallway was desolate, the only sounds coming from a ragged breathing. Doors on either side appeared swollen with moisture, and black mold crept along the walls in patches that looked almost organic, pulsing in the lantern's light. He led me to one of the last doors at the end. With a trembling hand, he unlocked it. "The bed is inside. I'll fetch a candle in a moment," he said. Before I could ask more, he disappeared back into the corridor. In the darkness, I felt blindly for the bed's edge. My fingers brushed against damp sheets. A faint scratching sound made me freeze. Glassy eyes stared at me from a corner, and I realized a rat was perched on a shelf. It let out a meek squeal, then scurried behind a crate. When the innkeeper returned with a candle, I noticed the plaster walls were spotted with holes. Likely the place was riddled with rodents. But I had bigger concerns. We stood in the cramped room, the candle's orange glow casting flickering shapes on the ceiling. "I saw it," I began. "A faceless one. People talk of this place as cursed. Please, you must tell me what is happening here." The innkeeper stared at the candle's flame as though transfixed, trying to gather his words. At last he spoke, barely louder than a whisper. "Many years ago, there was a plague of sorts. The crops failed, the animals died, and people were desperate. They turned to an old ritual. A desperate superstition." He swallowed hard. "They summoned a power with no name, promising their devotion and a piece of themselves. In exchange, it was supposed to end their suffering." A tremor rippled across his face. "But the price was too great. The entity took not just a piece, but the entire identity of each occupant. Ever since, every home in this village has its own faceless wraith, reflecting the person or family inside. Like shadows without souls. When the inhabitant sleeps or leaves, the wraith lingers, always present, always mimicking. It's a twisted reflection of who we are, or what we fear we might become." I remembered the rumor, that the shadows in this place mirrored your soul. My stomach tightened. "How do the villagers live like this?" I breathed. He gave a bitter laugh. "We live in fear. Some have tried to flee, but the curse follows them. Worse things happen when you break from what has been ordained here. The wraiths grow bold, take more than your image. They take your life's essence. Some vanish." A leaden silence hung in the room. My decision to venture here felt steadily more foolish. Yet my insatiable curiosity, that longing to unravel the unearthly phenomenon, outweighed my terror for the moment. "Your wraith," I began softly, glancing around as though expecting it to appear from the shadows. He shook his head with a stoic sadness. "She's in my house, my wife's place. I come here to avoid it, though I'm not sure which is worse, meeting my own faceless mimic or locking myself away in an empty inn. Still," his voice cracked, "still I prefer the inn's isolation. The wraith is more docile when I'm not there." I tried to let his words settle, but an urgent question gnawed at me. "Is there no way to break the curse?" "That's something we all have asked 1,000 times, he replied. "Some believe if we atone for the ritual, it will lift. But how does one atone for conjuring a nameless power, for offering more than can be repaid? We are not dealing with mere spirits or ghosts. It's something older, buried in the soul of this place. His eyes suddenly flicked to the doorway behind me, as though he'd caught a glimpse of something lurking there. "You should rest," he said abruptly. "No good can come of wandering at night. Not around here." Without another word, he turned and left, shutting the door behind him. Alone, I sank onto the damp bed, my mind racing. The flickering candle revealed more details. A battered trunk in one corner, a small table near the bed, which looked so worn that even a slight push might topple it. I noticed how the water stain on the ceiling seemed vaguely shaped like a distorted face. I tried to dismiss it as my imagination. Despite the creeping dread, fatigue overtook me. I collapsed onto the bed and drifted into a restless sleep. But my slumber was haunted. Figures glided through empty streets, each lacking a face, yet moving with an unmistakable longing. Then I saw a reflection of myself, a wraith with no features, holding a creaking lantern, stepping ever closer until it seemed to press against my very essence. I woke in a cold sweat, heart hammering. Dawn's thin gray light filtered through a crack in the window shutter. My limbs felt heavy, as if I had barely slept at all. After taking a moment to gather myself, I decided that I needed to see more of the village and discover if there truly was a way to break this malevolent enchantment. I emerged into the corridor, half expecting the innkeeper to lurk near the desk, but he was nowhere to be found. The hush in the building brought every soft footstep into sharp relief, making me almost cringe with each creak. I dared a peek behind the front desk, where I noticed an old ledger. Its pages had yellowed, and the writing within had begun to fade. Through the dust I could read a few entries, lists of travelers, some from years past, some more recent. Nearly all had scrawled their names, but the spaces beneath them, detailing length of stay, were blank. It was as though each traveler vanished after arriving. Clutching my lantern, I ventured outside. The morning air was thick with fog, transforming the ramshackle structures into silhouettes. A few villagers shuffled along, faces drawn tight with fear and exhaustion. In the half-light, I thought I caught sight of a figure standing in a window. Yet, upon blinking, it dissolved into the gloom, leaving nothing but the faint ripple of a curtain. I approached a row of smaller cottages that looked older still than the rest. Their wooden walls strained under cracked plaster. The earthen smell of mud clung to the area, and a low fence encircled a kind of communal well. At the well's edge sat a young woman, clutching her elbows in an attempt to steady herself. Her hair was tangled, her eyes downcast. When she noticed me, her expression turned to apprehension. "You're not from here," she murmured, voice trembling. I nodded, explaining, "I'm looking for answers, perhaps a way to free this place from the curse." She let out a small, mirthless laugh. "There is no freedom. Each night I sleep in that cottage, and each night something stands in the corner of my room. It looks like me, only it has no face. I can feel it mimicking my thoughts, my fears. My name is Eleanor, though I wonder if it matters anymore, if everything I am is locked away or being drained. Each morning I wake weaker, feeling less and less like myself." I took a seat on the well's cracked rim, uncertain how much comfort I could offer. "I was told you used a dark ritual long ago. Is there no one who knows the details or how it can be undone?" Eleanor's eyes flicked across the empty street. "The oldest survivor is a spinster named Yora. She keeps to herself in the house with the black shutters, near the northern tree line." She bit her lip. "I've never dared ask her about the curse. She's rumored to have lost her entire family to it. She might know more, but speaking of it might rouse the wraiths." I offered her what little encouragement I could, then rose, determined to find Yora. If she held any knowledge about reversing the ritual, that might be the glimmer of hope the villagers and I both needed. The trek to the northern boundary of the village took me past houses that seemed even more foreboding. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of figures behind curtains or silhouettes flitting past windows. In each of these dwellings, I knew a faceless twin resided. The wind blew with a keening moan as though mourning lost souls. Finally, I reached a squat house with peeling black shutters. Parts of the roof had caved in and the chimney sagged precariously. My knock produced only an echo. Heart pounding, I tried the door handle, finding it unlocked. Inside, dust and stale air enveloped me like a shroud. The only light seeped through cracks in the walls. At first, I thought the place abandoned, until a soft rasping noise lured me further in. In a corner of the dim parlor sat an old woman in a rocking chair. Her skin was pale as ash, her hair sparse and white, pulled back from a lined face that stared at nothing. "I've been expecting you," she said in a voice that crackled. She did not divert her gaze. Unsure if she saw me or only sensed my presence, I moved closer. "Are you Yora?" She nodded slowly, still rocking, her movements mechanical. "You seek knowledge of the wraiths. Everyone who comes here does. In the end, it does them no good." She paused, lips pursed as she measured me. "Yet you're determined, aren't you?" "Yes," I said softly. "I want to break the curse, or help you lift it, if such a thing is possible." She gave a tired sigh. "I lost my parents, my siblings, even my own child to the wraiths. Their life force drained, their minds hollowed out. I can't say I truly live in any sense. I'm just waiting for whatever end might come." Her hands tightened on the arms of the chair. "The entity that created the wraiths, it thrives on identity. When the villagers offered their devotion, they forfeited their sense of self. That power devoured it, like a feast. Now it's anchored here, sustained by the inhabitants' reflections." My heart thumped in my chest. "But is there a way to banish it?" Yora was silent for a long moment, her milky eyes flicking over the low table near the fireplace. On it lay a thin volume, half-rotted by age. "The old book," she said. "It's a fragment of the ritual. I have pored over that tome countless times. Each time I find no instructions for reversing it, only cryptic texts alluding to a mirror of the soul. It implies that if one can confront the wraith, truly confront it, and reclaim the essence it holds, that might break its hold. But who dares meet their own faceless mockery? It's said to be like looking into the darkest corners of your being." Her words set my heart to racing. To break the curse, one might need to face their own mirror. The notion filled me with a dread deeper than anything I had felt before. Yet, the bleakness of this place and its people's suffering spurred me on. I carefully approached the table and picked up the fragile book. The text inside was indeed cryptic. Varied fragments in archaic script hinted at an unholy exchange of identity and fate. My eyes drifted to a passage in a language I barely recognized, but certain phrases jumped out. Reflection, the container of the self, the devourer of names, atone by union. Yora's rasping voice broke the silence. "Whatever the instructions truly say, it involves reclaiming what was willingly given. But that process can kill you, or worse. I've seen some who have tried. Their screams still linger in my nightmares." I murmured my thanks nonetheless. "I'll do what I must," I said, though my voice quivered with unabashed fear. Leaving Yora's house, the morning had progressed into an anemic afternoon. The fog persisted, swirling through the streets. The few villagers I passed kept their heads low, as though bracing themselves against invisible watchers. It dawned on me that I had a wraith in this very place. If the curse truly mimicked all visitors, where might it be lingering? Suddenly, images from my nightmare returned. That silent figure with no face, raising a lantern just like mine. The memory set my teeth on edge. Perhaps it lurched somewhere now, waiting for me. Dread and determination warred in my gut, yet I forced my legs to move. I decided to return to the first house I had seen upon arriving. The one where the door had creaked open. That was where I had glimpsed a faceless reflection holding a lantern. My pulse thrummed in my ears as I approached it again. The spongy soil sucked at my boots, as though trying to hold me back. The wind hissed through the ravaged eaves. I stepped inside. The gloom greeted me, and I felt as though unseen eyes watched from every corner. Setting my lantern on a rickety table, I called out, "I know you're here! I need to face you!" At first, only my echo answered, a faint face whispering back from the shadows. Then, from the far side of the room, movement stirred. The same figure from before emerged. It had no face, just an unsettling smoothness, yet somehow it met my gaze, tilting its head in a reflection of skepticism or acknowledgement. I steadied my breath, reminding myself why I had come. It took a step closer, and so did I. My throat felt dry. I recalled Yora's words. Confrontation, union, reclaim what was given. How could I reclaim something from a creature that was possibly older than human memory? "Show me," I demanded, though my voice trembled. "What part of me have you taken?" To my horror, the wraith's faceless head began to shift, as though something moved beneath that pallid skin stretched taut over emptiness. A black fissure appeared where the mouth should be. I broke into a sweat, every primal urge telling me to flee, but I stayed rooted in place. I had to see this through. It raised its arms, mirroring my stance from earlier when I held the lantern. Then it did something that made my blood run cold. It breathed in. I heard the rasp of air as if it possessed lungs. My lungs. My entire body shuddered. A strange draining sensation started in my torso, and I felt my breath falter, spirit wavering. But I forced myself to meet that blank face. My reflection. "You can't take what I won't give," I said through chattering teeth. The words felt inadequate, a feeble shield. Yet I pressed on. "I reclaim what is mine. You are only a twisted echo. I am not yours to consume." Something within me surged, an instinctual rebuke, or perhaps a spark of my own identity flaring as I tried to wrest back my essence. The wraith jerked, as if it had been stung. A faint flicker seemed to shoot across its pale surface, like a ripple that threatened to fracture its shape. A horrifying moan reverberated through the ruined house, as though the walls themselves lamented. My knees nearly buckled, but I kept my focus on the inhuman figure. The draining sensation was intense. I felt a sense of vertigo, one foot sliding backward to steady myself. "You have no face," I continued, trying to speak with conviction. "You are nothing but emptiness. I claim my face and myself back from you." The creature let out a soundless shriek like wind whistling through a hollow cave. Its smooth head contorted, forming cracks in the shape of eyes and a mouth. The presence of such features was more chilling than the blankness, but in that fleeting transformation, a surge of energy rushed through me. I felt it as a warmth blossoming in my chest, as though some vital part of me that had been taken was returning. Beams of cold sunlight cut across the shattered windows, illuminating the wraith's disintegrating form. The cracks and fissures spread, revealing deeper darkness within. Then, with what seemed like a final wail, it collapsed, dissolving into vapor and scattering across the room as fleeting motes of shadow. The latch on the front door rattled in a sudden draft, and in the swirl of dust, the creature was gone. I stood alone, panting, chest heaving. Had I truly reclaimed what was mine? My limbs trembled, and my heart pounded so violently that I feared it would burst. But a strange clarity filled my mind. Then a deep hush descended over the house and beyond, wrapping the entire village in silence. Stepping back outside, I found that a similar hush blanketed the street. No moaning wind, no scuttling leaves. The sky's heavy clouds parted slightly, a rare bit of sunlight peeking through, casting a pale glow on the houses that had stood in ominous darkness for so long. Gradually, doors creaked open. Villagers emerged, some with tear-streaked faces. some in stunned silence. A woman down the lane cried out, clasping her hands to her face as she stumbled away from her doorway. From within, her faceless wraith dissolved like mist in the morning sun. Others rushed out, exclaiming that the presence in their homes had vanished. The air took on a curious feeling, as though the entire cursed heaviness had lifted, replaced by an uncertain but hopeful emptiness. Among them, I saw the innkeeper. His normally petrified expression bore something like astonishment. You banished it?" he stammered. "Mine is gone too. I can feel it." Behind him, Eleanor gazed at her cottage, a mixture of awe and relief shimmering in her eyes. "I woke up and the corner of the room was empty," she whispered to me. "No figure, no soulless face." She blinked wet lashes and pressed her hands over her heart, as though her breath was returning. Still supporting myself against the splintered doorframe, I felt my own surge of relief bathed in confusion. Had my confrontation undone the entire blight? Or had I only set myself free, which in turn rippled through the village? I remembered Yora's bleak warning that to break the curse, one must reclaim one's identity from the reflection. Perhaps my victory signaled a crack in the power that fed on all the villagers' souls. The clouds continued to disperse, letting sunlight wash over the ragged rooftops. In that fragile brightness, I glimpsed an aged figure standing on a stoop down the street. Yora, leaning heavily on a cane, her eyes wide with wonder. We locked gazes for a moment, and I saw her mouth move, though I couldn't hear her words. Maybe she whispered, "It is done." Maybe she said, "At last." The cluster of villagers who had gathered began murmuring in subdued excitement. Some openly cried, perhaps hardly believing that the faceless watchers were truly gone. A few rushed to shuttered windows to confirm that no shape lurked inside. With positions reversed, the wraiths had initiated a final battered stand, but ultimately they had dissolved like illusions in the wake of reclaimed identity. I caught a glimpse of my reflection in a small puddle left by last night's rain. My features were definitely mine, no blank visage. Yet, in my eyes, I saw a trace of reawakened power. I had confronted something primeval, and a piece of its darkness lingered, a memory of near oblivion. Across from me, the innkeeper shuffled closer. "Thank you," he rasped. "We can't fully grasp what's happened, but the presence, it's gone. It's as if a weight has lifted. I almost feel like a person again." My own exhaustion swept in. "I think you and the others will be free now," I said, the words sounding distant in my own ear. "But stay vigilant. The remnants of what once was might still cling in corners." He nodded, wiping sweat and tears from his brow. "Of course, we will, and we'll spread word to others if they ever come of your deed here." Before more questions could arise, I backed away, unsteady but resolute. The hush was transforming into a subdued chorus of relief as people exchanged timid smiles. Taking one final look at the battered buildings where, only hours before, silent horrors had stood in every home, I felt a pang of lingering disquiet. Could such a deep-rooted evil be dispelled truly and forever? Yet the sky was gratefully brighter, and the forest path called me. Perhaps that was all the certainty anyone could hope for. I left the village much the same way I had entered it, alone, forging forward along a path that wound through towering trees and eerie hush. This time, however, my lantern felt lighter in my hand, and I sensed no scuttling shapes in the underbrush. The gloom that had once pressed in from every side had withdrawn, granting me a reprieve. In the distance, I heard hollow echoes, perhaps the last vestige of the curse being carried away by the wind, or perhaps it was nothing but the benign murmur of leaves. I did not look back. The villagers would be left to reclaim their lives, or at least salvage what remained. I had confronted my own faceless reflection, and in so doing, I hoped I had severed the thread binding their cursed existence. A fleeting sense of hope buoyed me, intimating that even the darkest shadows cannot stand when one's sense of self burns bright and unwavering. As I followed the path that wound out of that forsaken realm, the clouds parted fully, revealing a sun that gleamed down through the canopy, and in that soft, renewing light, I found comfort that the village was finally free from the faceless shadows that had mirrored their souls.